Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Will James Gunn and Peter Safran restore the Snyderverse? This is not a sensationalist channel. I'm not interested in clickbait and sensationalism. I want to have a balanced debate about this situation. I've got my ear on the ground into where the industry is concerned. I spent 6 months in Hollywood. I'm very passionate about the industry, about film, television, stories, storytelling, and I really do want to have a balanced conversation about the Zack Snyder DC Universe conversation. Will James Gunn restore the Snyderverse? First of all, there's this myth that James and Zack are good friends because James wrote a Zack Snyder film, a film that Zack directed, one of Zack's early introductions into his directorial kind of debuts as a director in the industry. But I don't believe they're friends, and that's okay. I don't think they don't like each other. I just don't think they are friends, and you don't have to be friends. And, you know, James and Zack don't need to be friends for the Snyderverse to be restored. But is it going to happen? In terms of Justice League 2 and Justice League 3, no. I don't think that situation is a possibility because I think they're looking to go down a different direction. So if they want to use Henry and Ben and Gal and Jason and even Ezra, I don't think you can do that and then allow Zack to take these actors to do Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. This does not mean that Zack can't return in some form and direct a DC movie involving some of these characters or one of these characters. So where's the best place for Zack to be involved in the future of the DC universe as it's now being framed? Well, I think a cyborg movie starring Ray Fisher would be a great place for Zack to be involved with. Ray has a really good relationship with Zack. They respect each other's views. It would be a great situation, and I'd love Ray Fisher to return as Cyborg. And there's also another place Zack would be well placed to be involved with, and that's Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. He introduced Wonder Woman, he cast her. He's the very reason we have a Gal Gadot Wonder Woman. I look up to Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I thought she was great in BVS, and I thought she was even better in Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 2017. Now, Zack had a lot to do with that movie. He co-wrote the story and the screenplay and the script with comic book writer Alan Heinberg, and that turned out very well. Now, I like Patty Jenkins as a person. She's a very charming lady. But in terms of her vision for Wonder Woman, what she delivered in Wonder Woman 84 for me just wasn't fit for purpose and wasn't my thing. And if you like that film, that's up to you, and that's okay as well. As I say, I don't want to be divisive here, but I want to talk about what the best thing is for these DC characters. So if we're looking for the best thing for these DC characters in terms of Cyborg and Wonder Woman, Zack Snyder gets these characters. And when I look at Cyborg in the comics, and when I see him in Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut, that's Cyborg from the comics. He works in every way, and it's great. So I think Zack would do a good job with Ray Fisher, you know, directing a Cyborg movie. I think that would be great, and it would really work. Also, I think Zack being in control of the Wonder Woman character going forward with Gal Gadot would be excellent. I can't see Gal having a problem with this, although I do know she's very close to Patty Jenkins, but ultimately I don't believe she has an influence on the Wonder Woman character as Henry Cavill is going to have going forward. Now, in the Happy Confused podcast interview with Josh Horowitz, Henry said something interesting. When they asked him if they, how far in the process of developing a Superman movie they're in at this moment. And he said, look, as a partner, I have to know how to keep the good secrets. As a partner, he's not just an actor here. He's very much involved in the development process of the next evolution in Superman, in this brand new DC universe, in this DC Studios process. So Henry has got a big influence on how Superman is developed going forward. And I don't think Gal has that influence over Wonder Woman. I'm sure they absolutely listened to her at the studio. But the best Wonder Woman was in BVS and in the first Wonder Woman movie. So Justice League, she wasn't terrible in Justice League, but there were situations that didn't work for me. But also there was the situation where she didn't agree with Batman over bringing Superman back. I actually liked that. I thought that was okay. And so, yeah, so I think it's not impossible for Zack Snyder to be involved in the DC universe, in DC live action going forward. But in terms of his plan with Justice League 2 and Justice League 3, I don't see how that works. I'm not saying I wouldn't like to see that. I'm very passionate about seeing that. But also, I'm not beholden to seeing that. So I think Zack definitely would be well placed with Cyborg and Wonder Woman. And I think if they gave him that role, nobody would be that triggered. It would be less divisive. He is a divisive director. There's some people who simply don't like Zack Snyder and don't like Zack Snyder content and don't like the way he makes movies. I've said this before and I'll say it again. As a director, he is perfect. In Man of Steel, he's perfect because he didn't write that story. Nolan and Goya did. He's just involved in putting Superman forward visually. And his visual conception of Superman is absolutely stunning in Man of Steel. And the way he photographs Superman in both BVS, Man of Steel, and the Snyder Cut is absolutely beautiful. If I'm honest, I prefer the way he photographs Superman in BVS and preferably in Man of Steel. I wasn't a fan of the black costume, and I'll tell you why. Because it's pretty obvious that that's the red and blue suit, and they just basically put the black colour on it. And there wasn't time taken, because he wasn't allowed. It wasn't Zack's fault. He wasn't allowed to put a black suit on Superman. He wanted to give him the iconic Death and Return of Superman mullet and beard and everything. And he wasn't allowed to do it because the people in power just don't understand DC Comics, or didn't. They're not there anymore. So, we've got new leadership now who understands Superman, understands DC. Pete Safran and James Gunn are very knowledgeable with the comic books. And I think that's going to be very important going forward. Now, if James was not to restore the Snyderverse, I would have no ill feeling towards him. James and Peter have got a responsibility, not just to Zack Snyder and his fans, but to DC in general, and making this a very successful IP, because it's not a successful IP right now. Even though I think most of the films in the DCEU are unique, groundbreaking, and fantastic. Now, is it possible for Zack Snyder to write this, not write, but direct this next Superman movie entry? I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. As I said earlier, as a director, Zack is a beautiful photographer. He makes these worlds look better than they've ever been. No question about that. So if Zack would be willing, and I don't know how, even if they're going to allow this to be an option, because I don't know how Henry feels about this, but to me, if Zack can just direct the movie and not be in charge of its story or its narrative, then I think he could direct the next Superman movie. If he's happy to brighten up the colour palette, and he's happy to do that and work along these people to make the best Superman movie possible, and he's not going to be a divisive influencer, and it's not going to be all about what Zack Snyder wants, but what's best for Superman and the DC universe going forward, then I believe Zack will be invited potentially to be one of the candidates to direct the next Superman movie. But his fans and Zack himself have to understand that there's new leadership and it's different now. Now, this is a very interesting thing where James Gunn's concerned, because he was asked about the Snyder fandom. And, the question was asked in a negative light. And he said, listen, they're not criticizing a director. They're supporting a director. I like that. So he was very positive about the Snyderverse fans. Now, some of the I would say the cultists are very disrespectful to Zack. Now, I want to draw you a picture here. There's the cultist Snyderverse fans who are a minority. And then there's the wonderful people who have supported Zack Snyder and love his movies, not just in DC, but they love his DC movies and are very positive and lovely about how they celebrate Zack Snyder. I'm one of those fans, but I am not a here for Zack fan. I'm a here for DC fan. I'm a here for great stories and movies and TV dramas in general. So even though I like Zack Snyder as a man, as a person, as a father, you're not my father, by the way, even though that would be great, I wouldn't be against that, but, and as a creative, I think he's a very talented gentleman. I don't want to see him, I don't mind him writing and directing a cyborg movie with a cyborg comic book person, like he did with Wonder Woman 2017, or bringing back Alan Heinberg, the comic book guy, the Wonder Woman comic book guy, and doing more Wonder Woman movies. I think in that frame, he could do something very special, but you still have to keep a handle on him and what he's doing, and that's the thing. But in terms of Superman, I don't want him to write and craft a Superman movie. If he's going to be involved, it has to be purely as a director. Now, if Zack can just work as a director on the next Superman movie, then that would be great. Now, what does Henry want from a Superman movie? Well, he's spoken in the past, and he spoke with Josh Horowitz yesterday, and he said some very interesting things. He said he doesn't want a chocolate box Superman. What does that mean? This means that he doesn't want a campy Superman, a 70s Superman, saving cats from trees. But he also said that in his movie, his idea is that he would be doing those things, but he will be a hopeful Superman. But also, he wants him to be badass, right? Basically, doing badass things, but for good reasons, not, being evil Superman kind of thing. So when Henry Cavill talks about his ideas for a Superman movie, I think they have a lot of variety and balance to them. And I think if they listen to Henry, because I think The Witcher is all the better for listening to Henry, because Henry's played The Witcher games, he's read the books, he gets it. And there's a lot of people who worked on that show that really didn't understand the books, and Henry really put them straight. And I think there was a situation even Henry wouldn't be involved if they didn't listen to him. Henry's a geek. Henry's a nerd. And he doesn't look like a geek and a nerd, or any of the, stereotypical nerds you see out there, or people who look like me. He's a very good-looking nerd, by the way. I wish I had his looks. Then I would have the perfect life, right? But, yeah. So Henry is a unique character in terms he understands Superman. And he understands Superman fans in general. And he knows what they want. But he also knows what the industry and what the studio want from Superman. So the question still remains, is Superman a mainstream character in the 21st century? Can he be relatable? Can he be successful? So the cheers we saw during the Black Adam post-credit scene shows you that not just that Superman's still relatable, but that his Superman, or him as Superman, is very relatable, and we will see what Superman we're going to see next. So if you're asking me the question, will James Gunn restore the Snyderverse? I'll reiterate what I've already said. In terms of his plan and his Justice League arcs, I don't think so. But I think that James Gunn and Peter Safran and, more importantly, David Zaslav, as business people, understand that Zack Snyder has a following, has a fandom, and there could be a place for him somewhere in the DC universe. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely the case, but if it was me, I would find a place for him. I wouldn't be totally dismissive of bringing him back. But it has to be under the right circumstances. And so, as I say, a Man of Steel sequel or Superman movie where Zack understands his place as purely a director, I would be fine with. Him crafting and writing and directing Wonder Woman, he understands Wonder Woman, I would be up for that. Cyborg, him and Ray Fisher as a team, making a Cyborg movie. I think these are things that James and Peter and David Zaslav themselves can think about and say, there could be a place for him there. This would be perfect. This all depends, of course, what they're thinking of going forward. After these Hamada movies finish, are we done with the DCEU? Are we going totally DCU, DC Universe, and going down a new timeline? I don't know what they're planning. Clearly, I mean, they were seen having conversations with Adby and DeLuca during the summer. I'm talking about Pete Safran and James Gunn. So clearly there's been big discussions about what they're going to do going forward. Now, the difference between someone like Mike DeLuca, the co-chair of WB Pictures, and Toby Emmerich, the former chair, sole chair of WB Pictures, is that Mike DeLuca understands geek culture. He loves this shit. He loves it. And I'll repeat myself, I've said in many videos, he was very much involved with the Blade movie. He wanted to do an Iron Man movie years before we actually saw an Iron Man movie, and before that movie with Robert Downey Jr. was put into development. So what you've got two co-chairs who understand geek culture. You've got James Gunn and Pete Safran, who also understand this culture. So we have a really great structure, but importantly, it's not just a structure, it's the people involved in it. It's a group of people who get it. And this is what's given me a lot of confidence. So they'll understand that Snyder has a following, that he has an ability to direct beautiful photography and beautiful images. And I believe somewhere there is a place for Superman. So under that context and contrast, I believe if you want to see restoring the Snyderverse as those elements, as a Wonder Woman movie, or like a bunch of Wonder Woman movies and Zack crafting them and directing them, that's called Cyborg again, and him just merely directing a Superman movie, I feel yes. In restoring the Snyderverse that way, bringing him back, in other words, under those constraints, I support. But I do not think that this leadership is going to restore the Snyderverse in terms of Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. So if you're an all or nothing kind of person and you want the actual Snyderverse restored, in terms of JL2 and 3, I think you're going to be disappointed. But I think this is a very balanced leadership now, and it's not divisive. And you're not going to hear them talking, let's say, negatively about Zack Snyder like some others were. This is a very different setup. And I believe as business people, they understand that Zack has a following, and it would be dumb not to implement him somewhere in the DC universe. But as I say, the three places I can see him is purely as a director on the next Superman movie. I think that's very unlikely, by the way, but I think it could work if he knows his place. But I think the other two places where he will be the most effective, and let's say couldn't do much damage, is a Cyborg movie, or a bunch of Cyborg movies, or a bunch of Wonder Woman movies. I think either of those two characters being totally Zack Snyder's in this new extended universe. Well, it's not, or a universe, shall we say, it's the DC universe now. Got to get used to that as well. I think Zack would be really effective, and it would work. But we will see going forward. Do I think they have any intention of bringing Zack back to work on DC content? The truthful answer, the non-sensationalist answer, because I'm not a sensationalist or a clickbaiter, is that I simply don't know what they're thinking. But I think because this is a more intelligent, balanced leadership with Pete Safran, James Gunn, and most importantly David Zaslav, I think they can see that there's money to be made by having Zack somewhere. Even if he's, got his own Elseworld, like bunch of films and universe like Matt Reeves is doing with the Batman universe, or Todd Phillips with his Black Label universe. I think if you gave him something away where he could do something he wanted and that his fans could appreciate, maybe like an Apocalypse thing, a whole Apocalypse franchise, seeing the new gods, the old gods, Darkseid, Granny Goodness, maybe something like that would be the best thing for Zack as well. So I think potentially there is a place for Zack Snyder in the new DC universe. Whether or not James Gunn, Pete Safran and Dave Zaslav, decide to go this way is another case in point, and we're just going to have to wait and see. This has been Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection, and I'll see you again in the next video. Until we see each other again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.